Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the A+ Partner Roundtable. I'm John Hulen. I'll be your host today, and my role is to work with the A+ Partner team here at Crestron. We support schools around the U.S. and Canada. However, since this is a global event, we'll have the honor of being joined by schools from all over the world. So I'd like to welcome you all as well. When I found out we planned to have a virtual Crestron event, I immediately wanted to host an A+ roundtable discussion. I mean, after all, this is the time, August and September, when we'll begin to see the tangible effects of how the solutions, which were implemented a few months ago, are now handling the new teaching and learning methods. Some of the attendees joining the session are associated with schools that are only opening online this fall. Others, maybe most of the schools, will have kind of a mixed model with some students on campus learning in the classroom while others are joining online and learning remotely. So I really thought it would be timely and helpful to speak with a few schools that are rolling out their solutions right now and have them share some of their insights with you today. I'd like to introduce the three panelists for our event who agreed to speak and spend some time discussing how they're charging forward to meet the challenges facing colleges and universities and educational institutions of all sizes. First, I'd like to welcome Carmine LaPietra with Valencia College in Florida. Thanks for being here today, Carmine.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Me too. And my next panelist is George Claffey with Central Connecticut State University. Good afternoon, George. It's great to see you too.
Hi, John. Good afternoon. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And my third panelist is Joe Way with the University of Southern California. Joe, welcome to Crestron Next.
Hey, John. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks. We'll spend a few minutes hearing from each of our panelists before we get into the question and answer session. So for a moment, I wanted to speak to the attendees. Make sure you look to the right. There's the chat window. I want you to type in your questions for our panelists, and we'll see if we can get to all of them. As well as there's another tab with poll questions. We want to invite you to answer those poll questions. And there's an additional tab with files, and that has some great resources for you to check out. Let's begin with Carmine from Valencia College in Florida. Carmine, tell us a little bit about how many learning spaces you have, how many you manage, and a little about maybe your dedicated staff or student workers that you have.
Sure. Valencia College is in Orlando, Florida. We cover a range of 2 counties. That's about 76,000 students, and we're spread across 8 campus locations. Because of our size, we're kind of split into regions, and I cover one of those regions for us. And I have about 270 learning spaces. That includes a special event center, some specific conference rooms, specialty conference rooms, and then probably 80% of that or so is just general classrooms, I would say. So, and supporting that, I was going to say, supporting that, we have a team of about 7 of us, a couple part-timers, the rest are full-time, and our technicians are kind of multi-purpose technicians in the sense that they cover IT and classroom support. So they cover everything technical that happens on the campus. So, and that includes all those learning spaces.
So that's a little bit to cover. 7, 8 people for, you said 270 spots. I mean, so that's good.
It's a good bit of ground. Yep.
You guys are efficient, that's for sure. Well, tell me a little bit about when you began the process of updating your classrooms, maybe over the last few months or last year. I mean, what were some of the problems you were trying to solve or issues you were trying to address?
Yeah, about a year ago, we looked at redesigning our classrooms. And I think the 2 main challenges we were facing is downtime in our rooms. It was taking a bit long to get a room, either a piece of equipment swapped or a room reprogrammed. And then the costs associated with that were always a big factor. And I'm sure everybody here is like, yeah, cost, of course. The costs kind of added up when it came to reprogramming these rooms. And so we needed an approach to our rooms that was a bit scalable. And that's when AV Framework came to the picture for us. Bill Strupp, our representative, came down, gave us a quick demo on it, and we said, hey, AV framework might work for us in about 80% of our learning spaces. And then we kind of plugged in some of the numbers, and also we had to feel comfortable with implementing AV framework. And then kind of a side note, one of the things that we got a lot of feedback on from our faculty were we had those touch buttons on our instructor desks, kind of, the NASA looking
like
buttons
a button
that light
panel?
up.
Yeah, okay. Uh-huh.
Yes, love them. They're rock solid. The reliability on those is fantastic. However, we got a bit of a lashing from the faculty who kind of had some pointed comments about the technology looks dated, our rooms feel antiquated. So part of our design was also to kind of update the look and the aesthetics of our classroom to match a modern learning environment. And that's when we also wrapped in our touch panels.
So, and how did that transition go to move from button panels to touch screens? Was it accepted well? Did you feel like the UX was working right off the bat, or did you tweak it a little bit?
We tweaked it just a tiny bit, but it's the UI is just fantastic, and the graphic, seeing our logo on the top of every desk, the folks like that, and then it's really intuitive, the ease of use, especially with AV framework. We didn't overcomplicate our touchscreen, just the basics right there. I think it was very well received so far by our faculty.
Excellent. And you mentioned AV framework, so and how maybe it's a little bit simpler than getting things reprogrammed. How did you get into AV framework? I know Bill came down and showed you, but when you first started playing with it. Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Bill came and showed you, and that was it.
Bill came down. He brought some goodies. And to expand on that, we were aware of it. He kind of demystified it for us a little bit, broke it down, gave us a real-time demo, also offered to come down and train some of our technicians so that they were more comfortable with it before we moved forward. Once we kind of got buy-in from our team and everybody said, yeah, we can support this, that's when we actively started looking at AV framework as a solution. It's not a cover-all. It doesn't support all of our rooms because we do have auditoriums. We have a special event center. Those require more complex gear as well as programming. But for about 80% of our learning spaces, AV framework seems to fit. And that was part of our decision making. Once we felt a little more comfortable with Bill and once he explained it to us, I think we thought, we can make the decision on this and move forward.
That's excellent. And, I know you mentioned, too, that your installation's a little bit newer, and so it's a little early on. But how's the response been so far?
Yeah, so John and I had spoken a little bit. We installed our classrooms. We picked 20 to start with, and they were installed on spring break week, which for us was the second week of March. And the third week of March, that Monday, we were informed that we would be closed because of COVID. So we have not gotten to use our new rooms yet. And we're really itching to get in there and put them through their paces and get some feedback from our faculty. Just have not had the opportunity. So we've got these brand new rooms ready to go. Real-time update, though, we just did get word that we're probably going to use about 6 of the rooms in about 2 weeks. Very limited capability, limited number of students in the room, but we're going to plug in and actually use 6 of the rooms here. So I'll actually get some kind of feedback on these spaces soon. Excellent.
Okay. That's terrific. And, I was trying to think about what would be helpful to the attendees, too. So if you could think that there's maybe a school in a situation similar to yours, what would be one tip you could offer to help them maybe be a little more successful in updating their rooms, everything on campus?
I would say just be as inclusive as possible. We wrap in campus administration, deans, program chairs, facilities, anyone who's a part of the classroom we feel needs to have a say in how it's designed and how it works, including students as well, getting some feedback from students. So we sent out surveys, did a number of invitations for folks to check out the new technology, compare it, kind of did a little bit of homework on this one before we rolled out this design to make sure that everybody had a little bit of a sign off on it. And so far that seems to really have worked well for us. So just that inclusive nature in introducing this technology in our classrooms.
That way they don't end up implementing something that is a big shock. Even like I mentioned, the button panels transition to the touch screens. Sometimes with faculty that can be thrown for a loop. So, well,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I really appreciate.
You're right on.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah. So with a little bit of delay, sometimes it takes a second. But I appreciate you sharing some of those experiences, and I want to bring in our next panelist too, so we get to hear from him. I did want to mention to the attendees too, real quick, that there's some case studies in those resources. We don't have a case study written on Valencia College, but we do have a similar one about AV Framework and Georgia Southern University and what they've rolled out there. So again, that's under the Files tab. But George, let's bring you in and talk a little bit about Central Connecticut State University. Can you give us a scale about your AV technology, your use around campus, kind of how many learning spaces you have and what you manage?
Sure. Thanks, John. So Central Connecticut is in New Britain, Connecticut. We're a 12,000 student public university. We have about 30 major buildings on campus, and we have about 300 learning spaces. And I would say 50 of those are what we would consider some kind of a lab space. And that would take us anywhere through a chemistry lab all the way through to a large theater. So 50 spaces, we're doing something different than the traditional sort of classroom model. We have about 8 people principally that are involved in, and I think similar to Carmine, anything from the front of the classroom to the back of the classroom. And for us, that's a combination between our core IT and AV staff and then academic technology staff that work under the provost. So for us, it's not just about coming in and learning, getting the tech to work, but it's also about pedagogically, how are we going to use this technology? And we saw that partnership really come to fruition, in COVID, where we were going to have people, that said, hey, I'm an on-ground instructor. And so we can have these, PTZ cameras in the back, and we can have microphone tiles in the ceiling. And that sounds great, but we're not sure what that means to me. And so, how do we take the interface for auto tracking camera? How do we take the sound tile and some of those other things and make them accessible to faculty? And so, I think one of the biggest transformations we had over the summer, and I think, similar to Carmine, we were sort of locked out from the third week of March, through the beginning of the summer. And then at least the IT folks in this Faculty Development Center were able to get access to the campus and start building these rooms. We brought all those controls into the Crestron touch panel. And so the faculty were hearing from afar that there was going to be all this new technology, and it was going to be the future, right? It was going to be how they would teach synchronously, live online, and some of those other things. And there was a lot of fear and anxiety about that change. And a lot of the faculty had comfort because really we just reprogrammed the Crestron panel they'd been using all along. And before it was doing PowerPoint and other things. And now it had a different interface so that you could control auto tracking on a camera in the back. You could control students, near and far. And so for them, we found that the technology, especially the touch panel technology, was one, easy to change, but two, it was also sort of a security blanket. It was a common thing. They knew they had used that before. They'd been using it for 3 years. We're almost completely flipped all those classrooms. They're all digital. They're all touchscreen. And so this was really a great way to introduce them into that. And then also, we're course correcting. So we didn't get everything right. Nobody was going to get everything right. So as we look at the winter session, we're looking at how to retool some of these rooms just a little bit. And we're confident we can go back into that interface, sort of program it once. And then we've got 70 high flex spaces. That's what we call them right now, that are doing some form of either live or asynchronous online learning.
Nice. And I like how you mentioned the security blanket too, because in this, we've got an instance of where you transition from a button panel to a touch screen. And then in your case, a group of faculty that already is comfortable with the touch screen. And that's nice because they won't be as apt to quickly go, well, look at it, take a glance at it, I can't really use this. They know, they'll look around on the screen a little more.
Right. And there were plenty of those things, the PTZ camera in the back, the sound tile, plexiglass, a teaching zone. Those classrooms looked a lot different than they left them. So it was nice to have some things that were constants for them that they felt comfortable using right out of the box.
That's great. I know also you kind of wanted Central Connecticut State University to be a premier esports facility. And so will you share a little bit about some of what you did for esports?
Sure. So, and it seems like so long ago. So last summer, we decided to build the first in Connecticut in a public school dedicated esports learning center. And we do think about it like an esports learning center. So we use the Crestron NVX product. We've got this set up in rows. So we've got 5 people with a sort of a captain that sits at the front. And there's more than 45 screens in that room. There's 80-inch TVs that flank that space. There's 2 10-inch control panels. But when we're coaching these groups, and we have 3 varsity teams, we have 8 club teams, we've got recreational teams. This is a room that up until about noon every day, we use this for teaching and learning. We have academic classes that we can have in there. And then we do recreational gaming from noon to 3 or 4, depending on the day. And then we bring in the club teams, and then we bring in the varsity teams. And so, what the coach needs to do in that room to look at, where we have the A row scrimmaging the D row, he wants in very almost real time, he wants to be able to take examples of what's working and project that on screens all around the room, depending on what his configuration is or what the gameplay is. And so we found that this solution really worked for us, right? It's sort of any screen to any monitor at any time. And so now we've got TVs that actually face outside into the courtyard. And so in the warmer weather, we'll have people that are spectating and they're watching our teams compete and they're watching them outside, and we're simulcasting this out there. We also built a shoutcasting room in an adjacent space. And so our communications, our journalism students, they're able to take that feed. It's about a 3 millisecond delay, and they're able to do the live sort of shoutcasting right on top of that. And then we broadcast that out on our Twitch channel. And so really, it's been a tremendous project. There's an academic component with the classes. There's a recreational component for the students. There's certainly, from an admission standpoint, as we're touring students through the school, they grew up with a controller in their hand and they're millennials. And so they see this and go, wow, this is an institution that sort of gets what I'm about. And there's a competitive aspect. This is clearly a sport for a number of students who don't play basketball and don't play football. Right. This is their sport. And so this is a way to create, college acceptance. And that's so important, especially those first couple years on that college campus, to find other people like you. And we know where they are now. They're in our esports lounge. It's right in the middle of campus. And it's a great place for people to come and explore and experience games.
Well, and I can certainly understand some of the benefits to having such an impressive space, especially with like you mentioned, the learning and the competition aspects. I know my son would love it, but I also want to kind of understand what the benefits are to Central Connecticut State University. I certainly understand it from the student perspective. Talk about what you feel that the institution gets from it.
So, I mean, I think it's amazing. We've had conferences out there. We've had cybersecurity competitions out there. This is in our journalism class. When you think about, we've got an English course that talks about digital storytelling, because most great video games have a great story. And so we found a way to connect academics. So once the students got into these spaces, they started asking, hey, this is great. This is my livelihood. What classes can I take that are integrated with this, that aren't just in computer science? And so, we created, and I think, for the other higher ed attendees that are watching this, we created a lightweight grant process, and we ran that through the provost's office, and we gave faculty $2,000 to $5,000 so that they could explore what esports, this wide term, was going to mean to them. And we had awardees in construction management who were going to do virtual, construction. We saw criminology. We saw cybersecurity, journalism. School of Business is doing advanced analytics. We've got a ton of work that's going on in here. Even we're working right now with a local hospital. They have a vice president of strategy and simulation. They're doing health informatics mathematics and virtual learning. So I'm usually on campus when we have, new student days, and I'm talking to parents, and sometimes I feel like I'm evangelizing or maybe preaching that there are six-figure jobs attached to being good at esports. It's a lot more than a controller and a first-person shooter. And so we're trying to help people appreciate what are some of those occupations that are out there, and how can you take something that you have this deep passion about and then apply it to an academic program.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and I really appreciate you sharing on that end too. Like you said, and you couldn't say it better. You think of the kid with the controller down in his basement. It is really becoming kind of a technology that can change learning in certain ways. So I appreciate you sharing as well. And I want to make a quick note before we move on to Joe and USC that, again, there is actually a case study written for Central Connecticut State University and what they're doing on that files tab next to the chat window for the attendees. And remember to be sure to type in some of the questions for the panelists. We'll get to those in a second, but let's bring in our third panelist. Joe Way from USC. I wanted to first congratulate you for the cover of the AV Technology magazine September issue.
Oh, thank you very much. It was quite an honor, all I can say.
Well, I know you upgraded like 200 spaces kind of all at once in just a couple months. And my guess is some of the attendees joining us today are probably a little bit jealous that they didn't get to do everything all at once, but also probably a little relieved they didn't have that mountain to climb. So give us a bird's eye view a little bit of what you did up there.
Yeah, no one should be jealous of that, by the way, because I never suggest ripping everything out and then putting all new stuff in. But no, let me give you, it's funny because it ended up turning into close to 300 spaces because of, scope creep. But really this began about a year ago because we were going through our digital transformation at USC, like, a number of schools have. And part of that was kind of doing a reorg, and that's how I came in and got my job. So I'm the director of learning environments. I oversee all of our general use classrooms, which is pretty much most of campus outside of some specialty schools. So about 55-60% of campus. All of our general classrooms, lecture halls, auditoriums, group study spaces, computer labs, all of that stuff. And by me, I really mean my team. I sit at a desk, they do the work. And but basically what we wanted to do was just rethink everything that AV could be. And that was really what I was challenged to do by my CIO. He said, basically, bring us crazy. Rethink, if you could build from ground up, what would you do? How would you move us into the future? And I thought, wow, what a challenge. And you don't really know if someone really means that. Because we're so used to, 20 rooms this year, 30 rooms this year, the wing of this building. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to heed that challenge. And I began looking and said, okay, if I could do this over, what would I want to do? Where is AV going? And I thought, well, we'd never really done AV over IP. We didn't have any wireless sharing. We didn't have any lecture capture. Honestly, we were pretty far behind in a lot of things. And I thought, wow, what if we could move to software-based and cloud-based technologies, all IT-centric technologies? What would that look like? And that kind of began the process. And it kind of just kept, building steam. Next thing we know, and it was funny because we were talking, I found the other day literally the back of the napkin, drawing of our first generation that we did at the Experience Center there at Crestron in New Jersey back in November, December. And that was where we said, okay, let's see what we can do and create an ecosystem that would allow for a fully software cloud IT-based, system. And that is really kind of where it ran. I got the numbers together and presented it to the provost's office and said, this is what it could look like if we did this, redesigning everything, even a way we kept our technology was not even necessarily ADA compliant. And so I wanted to rethink all of that from ground up. And I gave a full plan, and I kid you not, the budget meeting took about 15 minutes, and they said, well, if you can really do it, it's approved. And I went, oh, yeah, okay. At first, you're kind of shocked and going, wow, they approved it. And then you're like, oh, hell,
I
they
should have
approved
asked
it.
more. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yes, it's the double-edged sword. Oh, no, now I have to actually do it. I got to put it into practice. So, well, and I've actually heard you talk a little bit about connecting learning outcomes. So tell me a little bit for a minute about how you feel that you help connect the learning outcomes that the faculty wants and desires with the technology you place in the rooms.
Yeah, you know what? And that really was key. We are very, very user-centered design based at USC and everything that we do, because it is all about our customers, all about our users, all about the students. And so therefore, when we have our technologies, it's not so much that we even just want to bring in better technology, because quite honestly, most people don't care what's under the hood. They just care whether it works and it's simple for them. And this is where the technologies, like, for example, using CH5 and using a lot of these, the cloud-based things, allow us to, and the voice control, this again, scope, we did all occupancy sensors, fully voice-controlled rooms. We did the little, you wave your hand over it and tell, start class, and it syncs with their Zoom. We use the Flex UC engines in all of our rooms, so therefore we can tie it into our calendaring. It knows it's there. It knows their classroom, and it can start their session for them just because everything is fully integrated into this ecosystem. And it really has been amazing, because now the feedback that we've gotten from faculty who come in and use the spaces, even though we're technically online for the fall, we're allowing faculty to come stream from the rooms. And the feedback is just amazing. And they realize that this was built around how they want to teach, not how an AV person thinks a system should be installed. And that's a very different thing. And therefore, all of this we had that flexibility to do that because of the tools that we were able to use.
Yeah, I like how you talked about it's a very different thing about designing correctly. So one thing I wanted to ask is really, I think you mentioned meeting with the IT teams almost on a daily basis during that time. What would you, I guess, recommend to some of our attendees to might help them build better relationships across some of the teams?
Yeah, I think first, give them tissues for when you're about to tell them how much you're going to impact their network, for the sticker shock. But no, the thing is, it's funny because literally right before this meeting, I was on with our daily call-in with our IT group.
Okay.
Really engaging them early. It's amazing because I think a lot of us in higher ed fall under IT, and yet we speak as if they're this foreign group. And so I think by really coming in and bringing them in early, which we were able to do, and say, this is what we want to do, and buy in why you're doing it. Because, IT people don't want you, throwing, 750 megabytes consistent down every network port at all times, right? But with that, we were able to really build a collaboration. We were able to have a partner in here that everybody felt that they were contributing to the classroom. And that's really what we noticed. We noticed that, the infrastructure teams don't get the same, kudos that we do. They're behind the scene, they're in the closets. But they knew that they were building an infrastructure for us that was going to promote great teaching. Now, they were just as invested. And so it's great to be able to partner. And I think that that's the key. Come in early, give them the specs they want, and be honest about what you're trying to do. Because the last thing they want is you get something installed, they're trying to install and say, oh, by the way, I need 8 network drops in this room. And right. Those hidden costs of switches and blades and all of that stuff, and, the multicast that has to be disabled and all of these things. But they're willing to jump in if you have those conversations and build those relationships. And that's why we have our call-in meetings. And I even think that it's something we're going to continue, because as AV moves and, as the offerings keep coming and you guys keep improving and bringing out new products, it only gets more important that we collaborate well with the IT teams.